Well, what do you want us to say?
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Caleb Melchior. Welcome to EmergentLive. I'm happy today to be chatting with Jared Barnes and Lindsay Kerr. I'm a designer with P. Allen Smith and Associates, and if I was a weed, I would be purslane, because I'm kind of omnipresent and occur in weird situations. Lindsay?
Okay, I'm Lindsay Kerr, and I'm a horticulturist at a private estate in Connecticut. And let's see, if I was a weed, I would probably be something mundane like chickweed, which fades out in the summer. Yeah, Jared?
My name is Jared Barnes, and I'm an assistant professor of horticulture at Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is a few words there to say. And if I were a weed, I would probably be Dodder Lovevine, because I think it's just totally awesome and cool the way it's achlorophylllic. And also another thing that's interesting is that it like has to bind itself to like another plant to extract nutrients. And I know some people have actually used that in research too. So that's probably what it'd be. But also because I just love everyone. Leslie would be poison ivy.
I did consider being poison ivy. I think right now my manager would probably pick that for me.
Yeah. Leslie's going for a Batman reference.
Okay, so Jared, do you want to ask the first question and get Jared started?
Sure. Jared, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro, just kind of a 2 minutes? Talk us through your story, how you kind of fell into horticulture and what it's been like finding a path as a career academic.
Sure. So for me, I've been gardening since I was about 4 or 5 years old. I actually have photographs of like me out hoeing corn and tomatoes as a young child. And I think what really spurred the interest is my parents both worked days during the summer. And so we would go and stay at my grandmother's house, and her dad, my great-grandfather, lived with her. And so he was actually a very avid gardener. And for me, I would actually like go out and work in the garden with him. And he would push a tiller, and then I would like follow behind and like rake out our footsteps. And so that really helped introduce me to gardening. And when I was 12 years old, he passed away. And that kind of left a hole. And so I started like asking the question, like how to be the best gardener possible. And I would ask people and they'd be like, oh, just throw some triple 10 on it. And I was like, I feel like that's not good enough. And so I started reading about things. And then my mom told me that there was a master gardener class that was starting locally. And so as a 15-year-old, my mom had to actually drive me to the class because I didn't have a driver's license, and my dad worked, late into the evening. And that was kind of my introduction to formal horticulture. It was there that I actually found out you could have a career in horticulture. One of my friends, Jimmy Williams, that I sort of met through that group, and Carol Reese, both of them, I found out about the Perennial Plant Association. I got the 2007 academic scholarship from that. From there, I met Stephanie Cohen, who suggested that I check out NC State, went there for master's and PhD, and then I've ended up here. Teaching has always been something I've been very passionate about, because as a young horticulturist, I would go to trade shows and there would be someone up on stage talking for an hour about plants, and I'd be like, wow, this Alan Armitage guy is pretty cool. And I was like, wow, I'd love to have a job like his one day. And so as a freshman in college, I went up to my advisor and I said, hey, and he was like, what do you want to do as a career? And I was like, well, I'd like to teach one day and get a PhD. And he was like, oh, okay, that's pretty specific. Most people don't know that already. And so for me, I think it's kind of been that I've always sort of had that focus of teaching and sharing information. And I'll say that, I've had the skills to do it too. I can learn information. I have somewhat of a photographic memory. And so I pick up a lot of information sort of like a sponge. So I feel like that not only the passion and drive, but also sort of skills and stuff as a student have helped prepare me for that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Jared, do you have to do research as part of your job?
A little bit, yeah. Sometimes we academics kid that we have different appointments and stuff. So my appointment's 100% teaching. Other people have different appointments, like 60% teaching, 40% research. But a lot of times we just kid around that we're basically 100% teaching, 100% research, and 100% extension, and 100% advising. And, but yeah, I do some research on the side. Right now, the research that we've been working on with my grad student, Chanel, has been looking at doing cultivar trials of Swiss chard. I chose that because, there's been cultivar trials of tomatoes and peppers and a lot of other things, but I haven't seen any recent information on Swiss chard, and that's a popular edible right now, especially with a lot of millennials. So we've done that. We're also going to do some nutrient studies on organic cultivation of Swiss chard in like pots for finished product. And then some of the other research that I'm dabbling into is I also want to focus on perennials for the Southeast. And so I've actually gotten a grant from the Fred Glockner Foundation to do a cultivar trial of elephant ears and do that very similar to what Mount Cuba has done in the Chicago Botanic Garden, where you trial like 50 or 100 different genera and then report those. And then I'm also doing a little pedagogical studies where we're doing a little bit of research with students in the classroom as well too. So it's a pipeline, right? I mean, it's not like I'm always doing all three of those things. It's just that they kind of fit in where they do in the semester. So yeah, those are edibles, perennials, and students. Those are sort of the three areas that I'm going to drive towards, I think, in my career.
One of the other things that you've been talking about a lot is that you're doing some community outreach, right, with the public garden that you're involved with as well on campus.
Yeah, exactly. I steward and oversee the Sprout Garden at SFA. It's a garden where we try to bridge the connection with people and plants. Kind of the tagline, a couple of taglines I have is it's a tangible garden, or it's a garden for tangible growth for plant students in the community. Another thing too that we say is it's a garden designed with food in mind. And the reason why is because we have areas set aside for production of food for people, but at the same time we also have areas set aside as sort of hedgerow habitat, or what we're calling food prairies, which are basically going to be perennial plantings that are installed and done very similar to what you see on the High Line of New York. And also, for example, what you might see in other areas. And the whole goal here is to, again, provide habitat and stuff for a lot of the beneficial insects that will be, pollinating and also providing some benefits and stuff, as far as fighting off evil insects and diseases and, that type of stuff. So, yeah, it's been, as far as community outreach, it's been really great. We had an event last fall in my fruits and vegetables class called an edible evening, and we had about 100 people in the community come through that. We know that because we started with 150 white flags. We actually had people go along and flag what their favorite plant in the garden was. And we picked up like 88 flags, I think, and we think about 20 of them or so walked off. So we had about 100 people come through. And what's interesting is that, with the people who come and attend events at the public gardens, the people that we saw at this event that night was a totally different dynamic. We had a lot of students that came through, a lot of younger faces, new faces of people. So I think that's interesting that, as a botanic garden, you kind of have to have a lot of nets to attract people and sort of pull them into the program. So.
For sure.
Yeah.
Jared, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the program? I guess who you teach, or what? I guess the program title. I mean, I assume it's not horticulture. It's got a fancier name and what kind of it entails, and maybe talk about who your students are.
Yeah, sure. So as far as our program goes, it's agriculture. Okay, so I'm in the Department of Agriculture, even though I'm a professor of horticulture. And our students it's a pretty broad mix. We have horticulture students, of course, that I teach. But then on top of that, we have animal science students. We have ag development students. We have also, animal science sort of breaks down into poultry science, equine science, ag development. I already said that. And then I'm trying to go around the building and sort of look at all the people who teach. We also have some ag education students as well too. So a lot of and ag mechanics. We have a lot of students as far as that. As far as plant genetics go, Leslie's asking. We don't have a specific focus for plant genetics, but I actually teach plant breeding. So I've actually had a lot of students, both horticulture and agronomic, that have come through who have been really interested in learning more about how to breed plants. A lot of our students come from either the Dallas or Houston area. They come from both urban and rural environments. I think one thing that's interesting is that I teach a crop science course, which is an intro course. Right now we've had 50 students in it that are pretty much agriculture, that's their major. But we're actually opening, we've actually got the class now in the science core, which means that we're going to start having a lot more different majors in there, that other majors can take this class as an opportunity to get a science credit. And I think that's going to be really great for them because, a lot of people don't know how to grow food. It's amazing experience to have these students, sow a seed and they go out and they plant it and they take care of their plots. And then they come up to you and they're like, so how do we know when this is ready to eat? And you pull off a leaf of like a lettuce or a mustard and you throw it in your mouth and they're just like, and they're just, it's just amazing to sort of see that reaction because they're just like, what have you done? Like you eat this plant without washing it. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be okay because I've been doing this since like I was 4 or 5. So to me, that's interesting is a lot of the students, some of the students have a lot of agriculture, they've been gardening with their parents or something like that, or they know about it, but other ones have never even touched a plant, really, or grown a plant in their entire life. So we have a lot of diversity. Haley, who is on here tonight, she's actually a student that went through our program. She was already pretty far along whenever I got the job there. So unfortunately, I didn't have her in only one class. She took my herbaceous plants class. Yeah, she's a great student. So. And LPM, yes, and LPM. She rocked LPM. Yes, she did. And Leslie, I want to go back for a comment from you too. You asked the question earlier, what's in it for them? Are you asking about like what's in it for them, the students specifically? Or like the people?
She dropped that in when you were talking about the public garden event and opening the Sprouts garden.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think that my whole focus has been how do we try to bridge the connection between people and plants at the university. And so, I've been trying to redesign some of the areas around the building and just try to make it beautiful. And people notice these things, they've noticed a lot of these changes and stuff that have occurred. As far as, how to have more to make it relevant to their lives. Like, for example, at the Edible Evening event, we had actually the students had different stations set up. And one of the stations that was set up was to show people, like, once you've harvested, like, what do you do with it? And so that's definitely what we're doing to connect it. And, the edible produce, I mean, the stuff that we produce, we actually can sell it on campus. So that's the other way that we make it relevant to people's lives is that in some cases we grow produce that other people can't or don't really grow. Case in point, Chanel, my grad student, she made the comment the other day that a professor had told her that when he lived up in Minnesota or Wisconsin, he lived near an Italian village and he had kohlrabi like all the time. And he really had no kohlrabi since he had been in the Southeast. Well, of course, we grow that because it's something interesting and different. And he said it was really great. And so the other thing too is that because we're on campus and because we're growing fresh produce, That's a direct connection to the students outside. We are agriculture. The problem is that, and I heard this in a lecture at ASHS last year in Louisiana. This guy was presenting some research where they had done a survey, and they said that one of the problems with horticulture is that when we teach horticulture, we don't show it around our buildings. Our buildings end up being plantings of hollies and boxwood and, Nandina and everything else. And then we're trying to design and show them inside all these beautiful plantings. And so, I'm trying to change the environment around the ag building slowly, in the plantings and stuff that we have, again, to make us more visible on campus so that when people drive by, they're like, what building is that type deal? So yeah. Kohlrabi is my new favorite vegetable. It's so good.
It is.
It is so good. Before I grew it, I had never had it before. I mean, you can use the tops. You can use the some people call it a bulb, but I actually think it's more of like a swollen hypocotyl or a corm because it is a swollen stem. Bulbs are, of course, modified leaves. But, yeah, I saw once in Time Magazine, they were like, Kohlrabi, the new kale. And then they had an article, they said, like, this is such a great bulb. And I was like, it's a little bit. Yeah. Which is okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually cooked it. I get it from work and I peel it like an apple and eat it on the way home. And it doesn't make it home with me.
Yeah. Some people ask about what's the taste of kohlrabi, and I'm like, imagine an apple that tastes like sweet broccoli.
Yeah, it's the inside stem of a broccoli. It's so delicious, and it's crispy and so good.
Right.
Jared, I was curious about like the demographics of your students.
Sure. As far as demographics go, we are dominantly Caucasian, dominantly college-age students, I would say. One of the things, though, that is really cool is that we do have some minorities represented as far as both Hispanic and African American as well, too, in the department. And they love gardening just as much. And from what I've seen from some of the demographics that have been posted as far as university research, we are, from what I understand, let me think about this for a second. What were they saying? We are a lot closer to being, like, for example, the diversity that exists within the county or within the region currently than we were like 5-10 years ago. So I think that's a positive. We have about 300 students in our program. I can't speak specifically on the demographics as far as the percentages and how they break down. But I will say that, it is dominantly Caucasian. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, we do have a few also non-traditional students that come back. Again, they're all walks of life, from people who, for example, we had a lady who came in the other day, and, she's a non-traditional student, and she's coming back to take some horticulture classes. Another thing that we've had occur a little bit more often is we have people who have been in some form of the armed forces, Marine or Navy or something like Army, that they've gone and done their service, and now they're coming back and they're wanting to do agriculture. In fact, one student, every year I always ask on the crop science lab practical, I ask for the very last question, what was the most meaningful thing for you in class? And one guy wrote that, with being in the service, that it was, again, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he pretty much made the point that this, service was traumatizing for me, and coming back, I really wasn't able to feel much, but having taken your class, I actually am able to feel again and have and love and care about plants. And I was just like, I read this thing and I was just almost in tears, after reading it, because I was like, holy cow, that's such a powerful message. And I've actually heard that last year there was a discussion at Cultivate about, horticulture is a wonderful opportunity for people who have been in the armed forces, Navy, Marines, Army. I'm sorry if I'm missing any. But that who have done those things, that when they come back looking for jobs and stuff, horticulture is a great fit because, there's research about how gardening helps therapeutically. A lot of the tasks and stuff that you do in horticulture require some level of training and stuff. Maybe if you were a mechanic or something during your services, that having those skills and stuff would be great for coming back and working on a lawnmower and taking that apart to fix something, if it breaks on the job. So that was a discussion last year at Cultivate. So I thought that was interesting.
So do you find that the botanic garden that you're working with, or Sprout, that they bring in more diverse audiences, or?
Well, that's a good question. So whenever I came to SFA, we had 19 students enrolled in horticulture, and that number has grown. Last year actually grew to about 30. I think, it again goes in waves, but I'm trying to think for a second. I think for most, again, horticulture for us is dominantly Caucasian. I think that for Sprout, I would say yes. Like the event that we had, Edible Evening, we had people from a lot of different walks of life who came to that event that night. People of different ages and races and stuff, they came to that event. But however, with the Botanic Garden, usually there's an older audience that generally comes to the sessions. So for example, last week, Ethan Guthrie from the Atlanta Botanic, he gave a lecture, and there were probably about 50 people in the audience. I would say that the average age was probably 60, 65, and dominantly Caucasian there. So, and again, that's why I'm trying to figure out ways that we can be more attractive to people of other demographics, because, I do believe that it is something for everyone. One thing that I thought was really cool is that, I actually, during my talks, I actually had a couple people come up to me that at Cultivate, I'm talking about, but I actually had a couple people come up who I'll just say weren't Caucasian, and I was like, wow, I was like, and young people too. I was like, wow, I was like, it's so cool that you're here, because I'm not trying to step on any toes here or anything, but a lot of times in horticulture, you see that it is dominantly Caucasian, and evidently someone who studies natural science once told me that there is, and Lindsay, maybe you know more because you've been more in the Botanic Garden world, but evidently there is, generally with horticulture, it tends to be more, or more people who are gardeners tend to be Caucasian. Would you agree with that statement, or?
Do you mean professionally, or?
Well, like, for example, going to Cultivate, there's just a lot of people there who, are all of like Caucasian background. And so, we're trying to, as Leslie says, be attractive by presenting ourselves as, a profession.
I guess I would guess, and I don't, I get so sometimes frustrated with, when we're looking at statistics. Well, who did the survey? How well was the survey,
Sure.
created? Who took the survey? So of course, statistics can be skewed. And
data collection.
Yeah, but in Botanic Gardens, we are a very white group of people. But that doesn't mean that gardeners, home gardeners, are not incredibly diverse. I don't think it's correct to say that there are more white people that garden at home than people of color. I just think that white people are the people that are usually targeted for advertising, for taking surveys, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point too. You work for Pearl Fryer. He's one of the greatest horticulturists in the Southeast, a lot of people would consider. And then also there's, I can't think of his name, but the guy who's also, Los Angeles?
Ron Finley?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. So.
Well, Pearl, I kind of smiled and rolled my eyes because he's more of an artist. He sculpts plants into these amazing works of art. He doesn't even know what their names are. So he would not consider himself a horticulturist or a gardener.
Okay.
He's not a horticulturist because he doesn't have the degree.
Right.
Artist, first and foremost.
Right.
But what a great way to get people, looking at plants a different way.
Yeah.
He's such a great guy for that, and encouraging people to experiment and try new things. And he does actually, he usually, well, I can't say anymore, but he used to have a little garden area in his yard where he grew vegetables. And it was so interesting to me to watch people go by, and they would say, like, what is that? That's a squash plant? I didn't know squash grew like that. And that's
Right.
exactly why he had it. It was just there for people to look at and comment on and start to
Right.
think.
Huh, that's cool.
Yeah, he didn't usually harvest from it. It was just like this
Right.
anomaly for people to look at and know where their food comes from.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, sorry, Caleb, go for it.
Oh, okay. Kind of broadening out from what you've been talking about, Jared, in addition to your academic work and your work through botanical gardens, you've developed a really strong career as a gardening speaker for different audiences. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started with that? And
Oh, sure. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what my first big gig was. My first big gig was the Far West show with Crystal Katie. I met her at Cultivate. I think probably about a year and a half or so before I spoke. And I think for me, what she just saw that I had spunk and interest. And I remember when we met, she was talking to me about, like, you know, what talks and stuff do you give and everything and stuff. I think what really got the bandwagon going is, for me, it's been a very organic process. Garden speaking has been one of the first talks I ever gave was it was at like one of the J.C. Ralston Color Field Days, and then also another one at the Greensboro every year in North Carolina during grad school. They would have Green and Growing. It was the big trade show for North Carolina. And so my advisor, you know, he got me signed up there to give talks as well. And so I think for me, speaking has always been a very organic process where someone heard me, and then that person in the audience recommended me in another talk, and then another talk, and then another talk, you know. And so it's been very organic, where usually, like, on average, like every talk I give, I'll have someone later on or something like that contact me or something, or someone in the talk would have heard me, and then later on when people are asking them about suggestions for speakers, they'll provide their name. I think as far as my process of developing talks and stuff go, like, I put a lot of time into it. For example, case in point, the talk that I gave at the Perennial Plant Association last summer, and it was the first time I'd ever given the talk. You know, it was brand new and fresh. The talk that I gave there about, you know, propagating horticulturists, I had actually conceptualized the idea for that the August before, and I had the idea for the talk before I was asked to give it, and I thought it fit in very nicely with sort of the message that they were wanting to do, and so I conceptualized and worked on that for a long time. And granted, you know, the majority of the work probably preparing for it, you know, was probably done within the 2 weeks before the talk. But nevertheless, I'm trying to remember if it was the originals book that we've read about, that y'all read. I think in there it was talking about how, like, sometimes if you have an idea and you sort of you sit on it and let it mellow, that over time it can sort of enrich itself. And so sort of through that process is a lot of times how talks that I give happen.
In other words, you procrastinated for a year. And then it happened in the last 2 weeks.
No, not really. It's kind of like it just sort of builds itself on and on. I would say that definitely I had a lot of details worked out, you know, before that. It's just a matter of, like, getting them down. Because for that talk, like, I actually present some research and numbers. I fermented. That's funny. Good job, Leslie. You know, I had research and numbers that I couldn't just pull out of my hat, and that's the other thing too. Because with that talk, it was very, very TED-esque. You know, sometimes with garden talks, like, for example, if it's just a plant list, you just kind of go through your photo album or slideshow that you've done and think about the gardens and places you've been and seen plants, and you sort of pull them together with a common thread through the talk. But because that talk was very, very TED-esque, that really changed the whole nature of it, because suddenly you can't put the talk together in, the night before. You can't do it, even in some cases the week before, because it's a whole, there's a whole nother conceptual level there. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Was I working on it? Was I working on it the night before? You bet. Was I practicing it the night before? You bet. But at the same time, the bulk of the work mentally had been done way before that.
Well, and that's exactly what Adam Grant said, that the best things come from like where you come up with an idea and then you let it ferment for 12 months and then, and then it comes out wonderful. Do you want to talk a little bit about that talk, like what your ideas are for propagating horticulturists? Or
sure. So the talk starts with me talking about biomimicry. There's a wonderful TED talk on it. You can go watch it. And so the talk starts with addressing that and how it exists. And I go through, that we face a problem of trying to figure out how to increase the number of gardeners that exist out there, or how do we start building the numbers in horticulture programs? For example, because we're seeing some start to drop around the country. So I said, well, a lot of times designers use biomimicry, where they look at nature for a source of inspiration for ideas. So case in point, I'm going to use an animal example, but I have plant examples in the talk. But for example, they noticed that when they had this problem in the TED talk, they talked about that they had the problem where when a bullet train goes through a mountain, it creates a sonic boom. And so they're trying to figure out how to solve that problem. What they looked to nature for ideas, and what they saw is that when a kingfisher goes into the water, it doesn't make a splash. And the reason why is because that long bill on the kingfisher sort of helps to spread the water as the kingfisher goes underneath. And so they applied that to the front of the bullet train. That's why you see those long points on there. Okay, so that's an example of biomimicry. So I said, okay, well, let's look at horticulture for an inspiration as far as, how do we increase the number of gardeners? Well, how do we increase things in horticulture? Well, we propagate them, right? And so I said, well, what if we applied the concepts of propagation to ideas and stuff as far as, young people or people who've never been exposed to gardening, amateur gardeners, and then like maybe people who are trying to figure out how to connect, horticulture in their life. And so for young gardeners, I use the analogy of seed. And I really think there's a lot of cool similarities there, because for seeds to germinate, they have to take up water, right? And for people to have their interest in horticulture germinate, they have to absorb something. And that something is wonder and awe. I mentioned Jonah Berger's book. He wrote Contagious, which wonderful read, book club people. And he talks about how wonder and awe are social currencies that allow us to share information and bond with each other. And so a great example of this, I was working in the garden a couple months ago. Some guy asked me, hey, what's this plant? He was there with a bunch of kids. And I said, oh, that's, honey bush. I said, rub the leaf and smell. And what do you think it smells like? He rubbed the leaf and he was like, oh, it smells like peanut butter. Well, he shared that with, another adult who shared that with two kids. Okay. That sense of wonder and awe is something that allowed him to sort of, share knowledge. And ultimately, when we share knowledge, that helps us connect with people. We see a lot of it happening on Facebook where, people like to show some cool article they read or something new. And Jonah talks about in his book that one of the most emailed articles on the New York Times website, when he was doing some research to try to figure out, yes, you do. When he was trying to do more research on trying to figure out why people share articles, he saw chocolate, Leslie. He saw that the reason that they shared that is because you actually, there's a sense of wonder and awe that there's something bigger there. And the article was about, basically it was someone sneezing. and they actually were able to videotape it, which is pretty cool. Honeysuckle sorbet is really good too, Haley. I agree. I actually made some and then brought them some of it in the class, so they enjoy that. I also connect and say that another way that we can propagate horticulturists is by helping people take root. And I argue that I think story is really important there. That story is something that I feel like we don't tell enough of in horticulture. We focus so much on like growing zones and height and spread and light requirements. And yet, you know, people don't know that the honey bush smells like peanut butter, or that, you know, another one that I talk about during the talk is that hippeastrum, you know, for like amaryllis, hippeastrum roughly translates as night star, because it kind of looks like the flower kind of looks like the star that knights would have worn. And I think that little tidbits and stuff like that are really cool stories that you can tell. And, you know, another great story about plants is, you know, Franklinia, you know, and how the Bartrams actually saved that plant. And so I think story is something that's very valuable. And then the third thing that I talk about is grafting. And I think grafting concepts together where we say like, okay, I have horticulture, what all can I graft to this? Well, I can graft food, I can graft technology. A great example, you know, with Pokemon Go, where people now, because of technology, this technology exists, the public gardens recognize that, and, you know, they're actually getting more people into the gardens because of technology. Well, how can they connect with that better? Well, maybe they can start offering, like, you know, some gardens have, you know, 20% discounts, or later nights, you know, where people are out. And is everyone going to like get touched by a plant by it? No, not necessarily. But actually, I think it was Renee who just signed on. She posted an article how like a lot of people are now experiencing nature and science when they're out hunting for Pokemon. I think the article like had a picture of a moth. Yeah, she said yes, it was her. Like the article had a picture of a moth, and like somebody was like, "Hey, I'm out playing Pokemon Go. Does anyone know what moth this is?" And so I think it's, you know, is it going to get everybody? No. But again, you know, I think that we as an industry and a craft and a culture, we have to think of everything that we can do to help connect people. You know, I asked this question at the Native Plant Conference that I spoke at last month in Millersville. There was 200 people in the audience. And one of the last things that I said we need to graft is love. That, you know, and I put up a picture of like succulents that have been spray painted. You know, for us in the horticulture industry who are like plant nerds, we're like, oh, like how would you mutilate a plant like that? But I asked the question to the crowd. I said, okay, you know, all y'all are native plant enthusiasts, right? Yeah. How many of y'all, your first plant that you ever grew was a native plant? 10 hands in the audience went up. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're not overlooking and just like scoffing people off and saying like, oh, like, you know, well, just because you're growing that type of plant doesn't mean that, you know, you're a gardener or you're, you know, a plant person. You know, I think that we kind of have to have a love approach, and you know, that's pretty much the talk in 4 minutes. I have a lot of more numbers and facts and thoughts and stuff that I go into, but that's the gist. Mm-hmm. Is that we need a culture, you know, like if I want to figure out how to propagate a plant, I have a cultural guide, right? That tells me when, how long, what length, how scarify, stratify. And, you know, I feel like we need a cultural guide, something that says like, you know, these are ideas and stuff that you need to think about. So that's kind of what I was trying to present in the talk.
Have you been in touch with anybody from the American Public Gardens Association or the other organizations that have been working on that initiative to?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you brought that up. We actually had a meeting at Cultivate, and they talked to us about some of the research. I don't have it. Well, actually, maybe I do have it on hand. Hey, I have it on hand. How about that? They were talking about some of the research, and he actually went over. I mean, they gave this talk. It was Doug Needham, so I feel like I'm not like, you know, stealing any of his thunder or anything talking about this. Let's see.
By the way, Doug Needham is the head of the education department at Longwood.
Yeah, at Longwood, correct. Yeah. So one of the things that, and I haven't had a chance to go through the article yet because I do want to. Yeah. Hey, look, Renee posted the article for the Pokemon Go. One of the things that has just recently been published, and I haven't had a chance to go through this, but this is an article that was published in Hort Technology. The title, I hope you can read it, says Importance of Horticulture and Perception as a Career, where they basically went through and looked at some of the research from some of the studies that, again, I haven't read through this, but there's some interesting stuff in here as far as, let's see. I'm trying to look at this really quickly.
Well, I think a lot of us.
Okay, well, here's
Okay.
So 26% of respondents felt strong agreement with the statement. Horticulture is a diverse area of study, and it offers viable, fulfilling, and respected career paths that I would recommend to others. So I think this initiative, I think it has a lot of promise, and I think that I think they're kind of going about it the right way as far as asking good questions and doing some research and stuff there. But I'm actually on the advisory council for it, and I'm not alone. There's several other people on it as well too. But I think sort of our goal is to try to figure out once we get this research, like what do we do with it? So I think to answer your question, the effort is moving along, and I think I really do think that what they're going to try to do is try to start targeting student. Basically, the focus is to target students in the schools and go and take the material directly to the students instead of trying to bypass the whole teacher system and just take that directly to the students. I don't want to go into a lot of details because I don't know what all they're wanting to share yet and stuff, but that's kind of the direction that they're wanting to take.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common. It was certainly my experience where I had an interest in gardening from the time I was very little, and nobody told me that horticulture was a career.
Right.
Which, looking back, seems ridiculous. But if the guidance counselors don't know it's a career, then they're not going to tell their advisees.
Well, and I thought another thing that was interesting is that in the meeting, we actually got into a discussion. I mean, it was probably a 15 minutes of an hour and 10-minute meeting. We got into a discussion about the word horticulture. Okay, let's pretend for a second that you're a student. You like environmental science. You like plants. You like that type of stuff. You've never heard the term horticulture, and you're going through an admissions list at a university, okay? You're going to scroll down, you're going to see animal science, you're going to see architecture, I'm trying to go alphabetically. You're going to see biology on there, okay? You keep going a little bit further, you're going to see environmental science or something. A little bit further, you're going to eventually get down to plant science or plant biology, one of those type two things. Or, if it's a really diverse college, you might actually see horticulture on there like NC State, horticulture is listed as a major you can do. But I think for a lot of people, they actually would recognize the words biology, environmental science, plant biology, before they would recognize the word horticulture. And so there was actually a whole discussion about, this word, horticulture, that are we, and again, I'm going to play devil's advocate on this, are we hindering ourselves because we're attached to this word horticulture? Okay, but at the same time, it's like, well, horticulture is this, is this science? It's the science, art, and business of plants. And I like to throw craft in there. I think actually, if you Google right now, like horticulture definition, it'll say like science, art, and business. And I think Webster's does at least.
I think that's also Horticulture Magazine's byline is the art and craft of gardening, which might be
really?
Right. Sounds right.
There you go. Yeah, sure. And so this whole discussion erupted as far as like, because, and part of the reason it was discussed is because one of the girls who was sitting at the table, she actually, she was young, my age. She actually said like, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." I can't remember her name. Hopefully she's not watching this. But she actually said, "I'm a treeologist." She said, "I'm a treeologist." And it's like, okay, like, well, what do you study? Trees, And I think that's interesting because, I mean, you could say you're a forestry major, but you could also say you're a dendrologist. And so, again, I think that word kind of like, you kind of lose someone who's never been exposed to it. And, I mean, I don't know exactly why Leslie is saying, because but I kind of think it's probably coming from the same place that I want to say, because it's like, well, I don't want to lose attachment to this word because horticulture and gardening are two separate things, right? That horticulture is more of like a profession and gardening is more or less like a hobby that you can enjoy. But again, it's kind of like, well, what word do you use? Well, maybe it's not the word. Maybe what you need to actually do is you need to actually like maybe market it better to get the word out and stuff. And Leslie's making comments and stuff about craft. I think that horticulture is a craft, and I think that craft goes along with artistry there because to me, someone who employs a craft, I'm not trying to take like a craft. I'm not trying to say craft of like everyone come over to my house Tuesday night and let's have wine and then like knit and sew together. Whenever I say craft, I mean like pearl fryer, like that is a craft, and then that's a craftsman or a craftswoman. And I think there are other cases and stuff where people have taken horticulture and they have turned it into a craft, sort of an artisan type perspective where you're doing it. I think the difference between a craft and a hobby is that a hobby is something that you're doing just for fun, but a craftsman is someone who's actually mastered something so well that they bring another level to it that you just enjoy it so immensely. Case in point, when I was in France I almost said last month, but it was now 2 months ago. When I was in France, we visited this garden, Le Jardin Plume, the feather garden, and like the garden was just so spectacular. I mean, just you would stand up against this guy's house, and I have a photograph on Facebook, and you would look how he had like pruned the boxwoods, and you would look beyond that, and they had these squares cut out in the meadow beyond, and these prairie squares. I mean, it's just like it all lined up on a perfect focal point. And it's just like, are you God? Like, I mean, did you just, because I mean, it was just so perfect. And so to me, that's sort of the difference there. And I think as far as a distinction for the general public, I would say that the people at, Chanticleer, I know that that's a level of art, but I would also say that they are craftsmen as well, too. That, they've taken a garden and, they've taken a garden and elevated it to that. The point is what? So Leslie's saying that we all understand the nuances, but the public doesn't. Well, that's fair.
I think that may also be a little bit of a generational thing as well, because I know, like, if my grandparents use the word craft, they're using it in the let's get a glue stick and put some glitter on this stuff.
Okay.
Whereas if like people that I went to college or school with as designers, everybody uses craft in the sense of mastery or having like really strong physical skill.
Right.
Yeah.
So it might be something that changes.
Yeah. Leslie's in that Gen X. She's a Gen Xer. She's a great Gen Xer. Yeah, artisan. Yeah, I mean, artisan bread. Oh, it doesn't mean. Yeah, well, maybe the reason it doesn't mean anything is because everyone's overused it, right? Yeah, I agree. I think it has been diluted, Leslie. That's a really good point. But I'll tell you what has not been diluted: the word splendid. Because Jenny's splendid ice creams, are just so splendid.
So, Jared, we don't have that much time left. So,
okay.
Is there anything you want to say at the end? Do you want to wax poetic about ice cream, or?
Yeah, let's wax poetically about ice cream. I don't know. What are you? You asked about what was another favorite ice cream store of mine other than Jenny's. I really like Goodberry's in Raleigh, North Carolina. Whenever I went there, it's actually a custard base, so it actually has egg in it. So it's really good. Another place that's really, really good is in Highlands, North Carolina. They have a ice cream store there. They have an ice cream store there called Sweet Treats, where they take and they blend ice cream and ice cream yogurt tubs together, and they put any type of fixing that you want in it in there. Another good ice cream place that I've been to is Salt and Straw up in Oregon. That's really good too, at Far West.
You've thought about this really deeply.
Yeah, some people have wine. I have ice cream. Like, so what?
I really think you need to write a Jared's guide.
Yeah.
And your fiance wife can illustrate it like Michael Jared's wife.
That's a great idea.
Books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she was going to try to be on here tonight, but she couldn't be on here. So, but yeah, that's a great idea. Definitely. Lots of wine. Yeah.
So does anybody have any questions for Jared before we finish tonight?
Yeah, any questions? A couple of my past students are on here. Yeah, I need lots of ice cream too. Let's see, Renee is on here, and then also Leslie was, or not Leslie, but Haley was on here earlier, but I think she's gone already. So
Cynthia's on here. She just joined us.
Cynthia. Yeah,
not that long ago. And Jason was listening in too.
Yeah.
So if any of you have any other questions for Jared,
Caleb, do you have anything?
Do you have anything else that you want to plug? Something that you want people to look forward to? Is there a website where we can look at you? I found about 3 different blogs that you've been involved with.
Sorry about that.
Where do you want us to follow you?
I've moved my website several times. Actually, with Leslie, talking to her last summer, I started a website on Squarespace, and it's Meristem, just like Meristem of plants, meristemhorticulture.com. And so you can go there, and I post a lot of my garden talks on there. I'm trying to get a blog up and going. That's a challenge. Hey, look there. Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate. But again, I really like Squarespace because it is a what do you call it, Leslie? I'm trying to think of the name. Responsive. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. It's a responsive website. So whether you view it on an iPad or a computer or your phone, it will adjust the layout accordingly. So I've liked having that website on there.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who joined tonight. And I appreciate all the feedback from the side chat as well too. So it was really great talking with all of you. Yay!
All right. Well, we'll see you all in another 2 weeks.
All right. Sounds good.